the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
It's not often, Chris, we have to deploy an umbrella, but this week is one such occasion.
Last week I had a smile from ear to ear, and it's the same for this week, Matthew, because finally in Norfolk some rain has arrived. It's been the driest 4, even 5 weeks that I can recall. Virtually 5% of the average rainfall for the last month, and we are dust dry, so it's just amazing to feel and hear the rain and that lovely smell. It's just arrived of damp earth for the first time. It's something so primeval in that scent of damp soil, and I'm always amazed by the power of nature. I've sort of recorded weather and rain almost from an early teenager, because I had to learn out on the farm how much water you needed if you had to water some of the crops. And an acre inch, that's an inch of water on an acre, is 22,610 gallons, or 106 and a quarter tonnes of water. And that's just on 1 acre. So when you've got the farm a square mile, 600 odd acres, or a village or a county, you start to realise of the power of nature, which I'm always admiring.
But the trees, everything else, the creatures, they all need this rain, don't they?
Yes.
And there just hadn't been any for ages.
No, that's right. And a farmer will be smiling this morning, say that's a pound a drop. I'm going to stay indoors because otherwise they keep it off the ground, you see. So it's that precious at this time of the year. Anyway, I'm always doing the Norfolk motto, and this morning it's a little bit different. It's called Do Different, the Norfolk motto, and we're right beside the farm orchard here. We're just going to walk through a little bit of hedge here, and the rain is easing off a little bit.
Rat is with us. He's not particularly enjoying this weather.
No, he doesn't mind though, because when you arrive he knows we're out on the farm doing interesting things, which we are this morning. And you might wonder what this is about. Well, this area was covered in cedar trees in 1987. There was a dozen beautiful cedar of Lebanon trees, and there's just one Corsican pine left and one large cedar of Lebanon. And the morning I was in bed in the farmhouse in that top window and all hell broke loose with the hurricane of then, and it flattened all those wonderful cedars, and it took 3 years to clear the whole farm up. We had 1,500 large trees down, and it's a night I'll never forget. So in order to replace the cedar trees, this area was bare ground. We buried the trees and the stumps with a massive digger, and I planted rows of apple trees, starting off nearest the farmhouse with the taller varieties, which are Bramley seedlings, then Cox's orange pippin in the centre row, and Victoria and Tsar plums. So it's kind of a tiered southwards sort of orchard with about 50 trees.
I love an orchard, but here at this time of the year we don't often visit, do we, in April? And the leaves are starting to come out and it's budding.
Yes, and we'll be visiting one of the wild apples on the farm later on in the podcast, and I can just see some pink blossom further down just beginning to open up. But you might think, why have I brought you into an orchard, particularly when we're going to discuss this plant in front of us?
This is familiar from Christmas time.
Yes. So why are we discussing mistletoe, which is what this is? It's a semi-parasite, and it really, I think it's a plant that everybody knows, even if you don't ever see it growing on a tree and realising it's a kind of semi-parasite. Some people say it's a proper parasite because it can't live without a tree. So the reason it's called a semi-parasite is the leaves are green on it. They're rather leathery and tough. Each leaf's about 2 inches long, I suppose, about 5 centimetres long.
Almost like a propeller, a double-sided propeller.
Yes, it is at the end, and that's good. There's a leaf comes out each side, and each year the plant divides back down, so you can always age mistletoe by counting back down the plant. So this one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, that particular branch of it. But the clump's been there quite a bit longer, because I started to get interested in mistletoe. There was only about one patch on the farm growing on an old field maple in a very ancient hedge. And what happened was some young farmers, local young farmers, hired an Eastern Counties bus, and they went to France in it.
Oh, yeah.
And
I dread to think.
I dread to think what happened. The intention was to make some money for the Young Farmers Club, and so they drove to northern France, where there's lots of Lombardy poplar trees, and the French farmers there harvest the mistletoe and export it, and they filled the whole double-decker bus up as much as they could possibly get with mistletoe, and they brought it back to Norwich, and quite a bit was for sale on Norwich Cattle Market, the old sort of fruit market right in the centre of Norwich. And there was a lot left over, and I listened to the story, and I thought, oh, well, I'll put an offer in and buy a few clumps. And I spent the following weekend up the top of a ladder with the Lombardy poplar trees that form an entrance to High Ash Farm. There's about 30 of them. And I had a screwdriver, and I pierced the bark on the Lombardy poplar trees quite high up on top of this ladder, and I did all the trees, and I thought, wow, that's going to be quite a display. And do you know what? Not one grew, because I mentioned what I'd done, and somebody listening to the local radio at the time said, no, boy, you got it completely wrong. A, that's the wrong time of year, and B, have you ever seen a mistle thrush sort of digging a hole in the bark and putting the seeds in? And I said, well, no, I haven't. He said, there you are then. They don't do that, and if you follow what they do, then you might stand a chance. So I learnt my lesson by doing something wrong to start with. And mistle thrushes will feed on the berries if they stay on the tree to this time of the year, and this is the ideal time to sort of seed mistletoe, if you like.
And these berries look very attractive, don't they? I'm surprised they're out in this profusion. They look like little pearls.
Yes, they do. That's a good description of them. They're about just under ½ an inch in diameter each, almost a centimetre really in diameter, bright white, and that's part of the scientific name. It's called Viscum alba, so sort of white sticky, if you like, in Latin. And that's exactly what they are. So what happens is, at this time of the year, it's a good time when, you know, if you're putting your seeds out, carrots, onions, all the seeds that you sow in the garden, you don't do it sort of around 1st of January, Christmas time, in other words. You wait until it's got a little bit warmer, and the same applies to the mistletoe seed. So the bit we're interested in is the first part of the scientific name, viscum, which just means sticky, sort of glutinous, if you like.
Like viscous.
Yes, that's a good description of it. So each little pearl white has either 1 or 2 seeds in it, and in there is this sticky glutinous substance, which is really quite incredible. So what I'm going to do, I'll hold the microphone for a moment, and you can pick yourself a seed off, or a couple, like that. And then
here we are.
We've got a nice branch right beside us, without too much. So you've just got to polish the branch a little bit with your finger, just to get some of the green off it. Yeah. Yep, that's
Give
good.
it a rub.
Look, and it looks like polished timber. Yes, and then you squeeze the seeds.
I'm getting soaked here.
Right.
So what do I do with the seeds?
You pop the seeds in your finger, just so it comes out, and you'll see a sort of a white glutinous substance come out. And then the secret is to get your fingers away, and you see it's so sticky, it's followed you.
Yeah.
You're getting it. See, it's quite an art form. Now you can see how sticky it. There, good. Exactly the thread that holds it, the seed, to the berry.
There we are.
They're well done, and you can see it's not right against the tree trunk, but it doesn't matter, because as it dries, although it's raining, that thread pulls the seed against the bark, and then something amazing happens, which takes a year. It forms two little rootlets. They're called hostoria, and that goes into the sort of bark of the tree, and that's the beginning of the mistletoe. And you can see some younger plants just here. 1 year, only 2 years old, look. But the first year it's invisible. Here's a 1 year old one, look. A little tiny 2 leaves. Oh, wonderful. Look at that, just coming out of the branch.
Just a little baby. And over the years, these become huge clumps,
Yes,
don't they?
it's very spherical because it grows equally each year. So it always divides into 2. So you have these large sort of spherical clumps. It's pouring with rain,
It's
everybody.
monsoon season here.
So that's how mistletoe spreads itself. And of course, mistle thrushes love these particular berries.
Come under here, Rat.
Right, come under the
Come
umbrella.
on, yeah.
And so they get all glued up with their beaks, and the only way they can get this sort of glutinous substance off their beak is to wipe their beak on the nearest branch. You can see yours hasn't been washed off. It's really, really sticky. It's quite an effective adhesive.
So with the following winds, that may well take.
Yes, yep, exactly that. And that's how I learnt to do it. So remembering that they don't drill into the bark of the tree, you don't need to do that. Just get the algae off, or it's called pleurococcus. Wipe that off, a little bit polished wood, pop it on, and manage to get your fingers away, which you didn't do.
Well, eventually.
You nearly had mistletoe growing out of your finger. Yes. Anyway, it's a really wonderful plant, but it's got a secret, Matthew, because this is the time of the year that mistletoe comes into flower. Look, right on the tip, you'll see a little...
There's a flower in the making there,
Yes,
isn't there?
it's hardly what you'd call a flower. It's inconspicuous, to say the least. And it has another secret in which there are 2 types of mistletoe. Male mistletoe, which is above our head with no berries on it, there, and that's also producing the flower which has a little pollen on it, and you need male and female.
Those flowers have come out a bit more, the ones with no berries.
Yes, they have. That's the male, and the female little flowers or flowerets are even more inconspicuous. So that's how mistletoe pollinates. But occasionally people say you can have male and female on each plant. It's a mad podcast, everybody.
It's a drowned rat.
There's a drowned rat with us. You can have male and female on one clump, but that's not exactly so. What's happened is a mistle thrush, or another bird that's eaten it, has wiped its beak on the branch. 2 berries have come off, one from the female, but a male is growing right beside it, which doesn't have berries on, if you can follow all of this. So it looks as though you've got a plant with male and female, and you actually only ever have male or female mistletoe. There we are. So I think we're going to have to retreat back to the truck. Oh, it's black behind us. That's really good news. I'm smiling even more now.
This is good soaking rain, isn't it?
This is the proper stuff. Exactly what we need. Exactly
and the
what...
mistletoe just carries on regardless.
Yes, yeah, there we are. A little secret of nature for you. And we're both soaked through to the skinner now.
And the rain is still pounding down, but we've taken refuge in Chris's pickup now. Rat has been dried off. I don't think your cloth cap is really suitable for drying Rat. You're going to take on Rat's scent, I should think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, he won't mind. He has a chance of finding me if he loses me. But I gave him a good rub down, and he's calmed down a bit now. Anyway, he is soaked through to the skin. We all 3 of us are this morning. But I don't mind, because it's just absolutely glorious. Nectar from the gods, this rain.
Yes, he's got a broad grin watching the rain falling. We'll get out in it as well in a second, but an opportunity to look at some of your emails, and lots of people do take the time, and we're very grateful. Thank you for sending your questions and comments. The email address, as always, chris@highashfarm.com. And here's one from sunny Spain. They get their fair share of rain as well. Martin Andrews lives in the south of Spain, and he says you should be receiving a delivery today containing a couple of house martin boxes. And have they arrived?
They certainly have, and they are luxury ones, absolutely superbly made and manufactured. I've got one left-hand one and one right-hand one. Yes, so the holes face slightly different directions, so any house martins, and the nests on the farm cottages, and these two nest boxes which have been donated incredibly generously, will go onto the farm cottages just above one of the windows, one of the small windows, and see if we can encourage larger numbers than we have. We're doing really well for our swallows at the farm. We've now got over 20 adults returned from migration. The house martins normally arrive about now, a little bit later this year, but numbers have dwindled hugely, and doing everything that I possibly can to encourage them back. And our local supermarket has also got some nesting in the apex of the store. That's Tesco's at Harford Bridges. Congratulations to them for allowing the birds to nest on the outside of the store there. But it's a species in quite serious decline, and last year on one of our podcasts we actually visited the local sand martin colonies at the quarry at Caistor St Edmund, right on the edge of High Ash Farm, and they're some of the first migrants to arrive of the species that we have here: swallows, house martins, sand martins, and unrelated but arriving about the 15th of May, the swifts, which I always look forward to as well.
Or from Spain, we go to France, and Gillian Handyside lives in the woods near Paris. And lovely to hear from you, Gillian. She says our swift should be here in a couple of weeks' time. Can't wait. She was listening to you talking about dandelions.
Yes.
And she says in French, dandelion, another name is pissenlit. Piss the bed.
Yes, so I did mention that, and I think a few people frowned about me using that word, but it's coming right through from my childhood, and there is a chemical in which you can extract from the roots. I think it's called laudanum, that you can use. It was used as, for treatment for depression years and years ago, but also it's meant to relieve urinary tract problems, and and children were kidded up really that you'd have to eat about a kilo of dandelion leaves for it to have any effect whatsoever. But it has got that reputation of sort of relieving the urinary tract, which we say.
So apologies for that word, but it's a good old English word.
It
that
is.
Gillian says also that I've just heard a crow's courtship song for the first time this year. Beautiful, rather touching, and in the local crow dialect, this is the big woods east of Paris, she tells us, the courtship call is 3 soft fluty notes and a simultaneous beak clacking. I tried it, but it's like attempting Mongolian throat singing, too hard. So she goes on to say, what dialect do the High Ash crows use?
Yes, I've recorded their courtship song as well, and here it's a little bit different, whether it's just a different language, but what I've recorded is really close to a church bell chiming, and I'll see if I can record it. It's on one of my ancient magnetic cassette tapes, but it's quite unique, and it's the male crow actually uttering this sound to the female while he's bowing and fanning his tail at the same time, part of the sort of elaborate courtship display that crows and rooks have as well.
So any emails, we're always grateful to receive them. chris@highashfarm.com. Also a big thank you to everyone who's donated to the podcast to keep it going, the running costs, and also money towards Chris's various projects on High Ash Farm. He's harebrained schemes, some may say.
Well, yes, but we've had some very generous donations, and it's enabled me to actually sow a new hectare of wildflower field. It's now a vacant plot. We're waiting for the rain to soak in, and I've managed to get some native wildflower seed, things like cornflower, corn cockle, corn marigold, and poppies, of course, and it's for 1 year, and that will be right by one of the permissive walks, right in the centre of High Ash Farm. So a hectare, it's about 2.5 acres in old money there, and so that's a huge thank you again. It pays for all the work necessary and the cost of buying some of the seed in. Some we use ourselves, produced at High Ash Farm, and some's actually bought in because some of them are quite scarce now. Farmland weeds, as they used to be called. Corn marigold in particular used to be quite a problem over a century ago in arable crops, things like wheat and barley, which were grown in the spring. And because it's an annual, it would grow quite early in the year and actually sort of overwhelm the crop, and yet it's now a scarce arable plant.
Well, thank you once again to all our donors, and if you'd like to become one, you can find out more on the High Ash Farm website, highashfarm.com/podcast. The rain is easing.
Yes.
I've brought the ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of cost we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance.
A little creature in.
You
I didn't
have.
realise from
Yes.
the orchard there, just
Yes.
come in with us, a tiny little green spider.
It is. I don't know the species name of that, but it's very active and it's crawling about on Matthew's fingers, but it'll be able to come out in a moment because we visited the modern apple varieties, and we're now going to visit their ancestor, if you like, from years ago, where all our apple varieties have come from. It's quite scarce tree now. It's the English crabapple. Well, come on, let's get out the truck. I can hear it's almost stopped raining, and right in front of us, although we've steamed the windows up, everybody, right in front of us is a fantastic sight, and I'll get Laura Cuffin here, our native photographer, later on, as soon as the rain's finished, and we'll photograph the mistletoe for you, although it's not Christmas, and this crabapple, which is an amazing sight.
Looking up, Chris, and there's quite a bit of colour even on this rather grey day.
Yes, Matthew, we've hit it bang on. It's the flowering time for the crabapple. And this is a British native tree, would you believe? There are lots of what are called crabapple trees out in the countryside where people used to eat their apples as they walked along and through the core in the hedge, and somehow or other the seeds would grow, and they're actually something different. They're called wildings, whereas the native crabapple is almost a spiny, prickly tree. And if we walk up close, you won't see this on a normal apple tree. It looks like blackthorn. Look, spikes.
Yes.
Quite sharp
Little
ones.
thorns.
Yes, and it forms a very dense sort of thicket of a tree. And I'm calling it a tree because this one's about 25 feet tall, about 8 metres, something like that. And it's just coming into flower. And on the south side of it it is a glorious, glorious sight. And the flowers aren't quite as pink as the native apples which we looked at, although they do have quite a bit of pink on the buds just before they open up. They're glorious.
There's a lot of white there,
Yes,
isn't there? But with the pink
five
tips.
petals and the little pollen-bearing stamens in the centre there, about to come into flower. So all our native apple trees that are now used, domestic apples, in other words, the Cox's orange pippin is descended from this, Bramley seedlings as well, they're all grafted onto crabapple rootstocks and grow up from that. But the modern varieties are much more bush-shaped and much lower, they're easier to pick. You can imagine having a Bramley seedling up 20 feet high and having got a ladder to gather. So instead of having just a few hundred trees per acre or hectare, you can now have literally hundreds and hundreds because the trees are diminutive. And that's the reason when we started this podcast with the mistletoe, that's why mistletoe's now become quite scarce these days, because the old orchards in a particular line from the Wash across to the Bristol Channel, anything south of there, the old Kent areas where apple growing was very, very popular, and cider apples as well. Those older trees, many of them had mistletoe on them, been grubbed out now, and the new varieties, there's no space really for the mistletoe to get established. So this is really quite an important tree in terms of the gene bank, if you like, and it's spiny, which surprises everybody.
When does the fruit appear then?
Right. What happens now is it now comes into flower, and you need some sort of warm, sunny weather, which we hope will follow this rain event that we're having. Then the bees will come in and pollinate it. And if you want to increase your apple crop in new commercial orchards, often the orchard farmers will often put about one hive of bees per acre, to give you a rough idea. A good colony of bees will be between 70,000 working bees in there, and they come out and pollinate the flowers. So insect pollination is absolutely crucial for them, which is why bees are so important. People often forget the link between the fruit you eat in the shop and some part back earlier in each year, a bee visited that flower and pollinated it, and that's how crucial it is for many of our things that we eat. Do you know what?
He wants to go home. He's halfway home.
He's halfway. He's sitting down, looking very dejected, and said, "I've had enough of this."
So he's trying to drop a very unsubtle hint that he wants you to join him and then back up to the farm.
Yes, look, there he goes. Poor dog, his tail's down, and he's had enough of this podcast business. But that's crucial. So don't be fooled by many of the so-called crab apples you see if you're out walking in the countryside. Many of them are called wildings, and trees like this, which is over 100 years old, this particular tree, actually is the true crabapple with the spines. You can see when you look through it, and we're looking at the lower branches, it's incredibly dense. It doesn't almost look like an apple tree, and yet the early breeders, Mr. Cox actually used used the seeds from one of these crabapple trees and crossed it with another variety and ended up with that wonderful Cox's orange pippin. Would you believe it? And there are now thousands of varieties of apples, many of which have been lost, gone back into history. They weren't productive, or they didn't store very well over the winter months. And lots of history has been lost, but there are still some of the old varieties, and I've kept some in the orchard. I managed to get some from special nurseries dotted about the country, and I'm growing Laxton Superb and one or two other varieties as well, which are quite old and unfashionable, but nevertheless they're delicious, and some of them have that lovely rose colour on. Eating apples and cooking apples. I love my Bramleys. I often make a Bramley apple pie, and or just microwave them and have them with some yogurt. They're just absolutely delicious.
And you're too polite to say, but a lot of the supermarket varieties grown for volume, they just aren't the same as...
No. There's a particular way I gather my Bramleys quite late in the season, and they've got this blush on them, or almost as though they're sunburnt, and they turn almost red, whereas a lot of the Bramleys that you buy are just pure green. They've been gathered early and stored, and then the flavour develops, and I'll often cook. The last ones are just about to be cooked. They've been stored in cardboard boxes over the winter months, and they are absolutely delicious. So there we are. So I'll stand by the apples, but particularly this one, if you're trying to put your teeth into a crab apple, then
Draw your backside up to your elbow.
well, I was
wouldn't
going
it?
to say something more polite. Your elbows up to your ears. I think we'll go for that. Go for that one for politeness. And they are incredibly bitter, but they drop on the ground, and then the sugars and the yeasts which are on the ground start to develop and convert that acidity, which is really good. It's very high in pectin. My mum used to make me come out and gather crab apples, and she would use the pectin as a preservative. It's really, really powerful chemical in there. Anyway, Matthew, I think we're going to get back in the truck.
Yes, the rain has only eased ever so slightly.
Yes, yeah. And Matthew's shoulders are up by his ears, and Rat is facing homewards about 100 yards away from us, wishing that we were going back that way, and he's wrong. We're going to an even wetter spot now. Ratty. Come on.
Rain is relenting, but there's a clue that it's still raining on the lake here, Chris. We can see lots of little ripples created by the falling raindrops. But I always love being here, and you've got a family of ducks over the other side, or maybe a soon-to-be family.
Yes, she's incubating. The duck is on the far side of the water here. There's a dense bramble patch, and she's made her nest right on the far side. We've got flag iris coming out all the way around the edge of the lake. It's fairly new construction. It's 2006 it was excavated, and all round the margins, as I've explained many times that we've been here, the water is quite shallow, and the grass sort of merges into the water very gradually. But about 2 podcasts ago, I think maybe 2, maybe 3 podcasts ago, we visited here, and the whole side of the lake here was strewn with frog spawn just in the water, and I was dreading the dry weather, that the water level would drop down and leave it high and dry. But somehow or other, the water level's maintained itself exactly where it should be, so we've got the shallow margin all the way round. The frog spawn is no more. Something magic has happened in the last 24 hours. There's been a simultaneous hatching. The whole lot has hatched and gone, including the toads. And what we're going to do, because you've got wellies on and I haven't, so it's your turn to get your feet in the water this week. If you just walk this way a little bit, let's just get a little bit further. That's it. Good. Now, if you look down in the water...
Oh, wow. Whoa.
Look.
Little wiggly tadpoles.
Yes.
Fantastic.
You can't tell at this stage the difference between frog and toad, because they've hatched simultaneously. The conditions have been absolutely perfect. There's been no hard frost for them. They've escaped the worst of the predation. I can't see any adults, but what happens as soon as the spawn has been laid, the females and the males, they exit the pond and spend the rest of the year on dry land, which is why collectively they're called amphibians. So you spend part of your life in water, or closely related with water, and part of your life on dry land.
And
So-
they leave the children to it, do they?
No, they're completely left to their own devices. But have you ever heard of creches with animals where all the young sort of join together? You have it in humans, obviously, you can leave it. But something magical happens, and this only happens once a year. Matthew, just walk into the water a little bit and look down into the depths.
Oh, look, that dark colour.
The dark colour.
Are
There, and there.
So
Look.
that's a clump of tadpole.
Tens of thousands of them. Look at that huge one to the left.
Oh, look, yeah.
Yeah, the water, the
It's
rain
lovely
on the
clear.
water is breaking up the surface a little bit, but you can actually see them moving, and they have segregated themselves, although the water's about 2 feet. Let's just
all the
walk
way up
up a
here.
little bit. Oh, don't fall over, because, well, we can't get any wetter. Oh, wow, this is better. Look, I am so chuffed to bits. Look at that.
Many of them.
There is perhaps 10,000 tadpoles in each of those clumps.
So the numbers just swimming in the shallows here are actually
Right,
outnumbered
they're
by those.
on their way down. Look, you can see tadpoles making their way towards the creche that have just hatched out this morning, and they will then disperse. It only happens, so what you're seeing is almost unique to the day. They disperse all round the periphery of the lake because it gives them a much better chance of not being eaten. There are rudd in this lake, a fish that will certainly eat them. But what they're now doing is we're waiting for the algae to start to grow in the water, plant life, which is what they'll start to feed on. They're sort of vegetarian to start with. They're reabsorbing anything left from the frog spawn, and so you see some of them with quite large bellies almost, and that's the reabsorption of the last of that. And after that, they are completely independent and got to feed and look after themselves. But I can't tell from here whether we're looking at the toad spawn tadpoles or the frog spawn. Look, there's some actually making their way down. They seem to know which clump to go to. It's an amazing sight. Some of the clumps are not much larger than a large dinner plate, and some are 3 feet long at least. And the larger ones, as I said, I've sort of looked at them carefully, and I'm guesstimating sort of 8 to 10,000 in some of the larger clumps. That is an amazing sight. Bang on your visit this week. We came tomorrow, they wouldn't be here. They'd all be dispersed around the grass margins. It's a glorious sight. Just and this is their home. They'll be in here until August, September time, and then these tiny little froglets, if they're frogs, come out. They will actually... Oh, wren on the others. Been serenaded by a high-pitched wren then. And so they will then leave the water environment further north up in Scotland, and sometimes they stay in the tadpole form right through until the following year, which is quite unusual. They don't get that metamorphosis, that complete transition.
As we're nearer the equator.
Yes, we just a few steps. But there we are. Now, if you look down carefully, you'll actually see the sort of volume of them. And all the tiny little dots. That is an amazing, amazing sight, I promise you. You are completely spoilt.
And how many of them will survive to
Exactly
become
that,
proper
yes.
frogs?
I know.
But this is their survival mechanism,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
Produce a lot.
Yes, produce a lot, which is sort of nature's way of coping. There goes some more down, look. Just swimming down to join the creche. You can see them through the clear water.
These
the
are
rain's
very small,
Yes.
less than half an inch.
They certainly are, and you can't tell who's who, but down on the bottom there, they know. So either all frog tadpoles together or all toads, I should say. I think we need a complete change of clothes. I'm soaked through to the skin.
So I feel a bit akin to a tadpole today, I have to say.
I could call you worse, but I won't.
I'm a tadpole. Yes. Well, what an honour to see this stage in their life, and wouldn't it be great, Chris, if we followed it through later in the season?
Yes, well, hopefully, if we choose the right day, you get a nice thundery day when there's been some rain around end of July into August, and then the whole margin here is crawling with little froglets that really do look like frogs. Some of them still have a bit of a tail on, and they reabsorb the tail as well as all part of their nutrition, their life cycle. There we are, another stage of the metamorphosis. So will I turn into a butterfly in later life, do you think?
You might be leaving it a little late now. I quite fancy sitting by a radiator now and steaming for half an hour.
Right. Well, yes. Well, I'll let you jog back to the farm then.